In this episode of Three Food Memories, I speak with a British food writer, critic, broadcaster, and author of no less than 9 cookbooks. How to get into food? He says, I loved eating and could just about string a sentence together, so I thought I could write about it. I was rubbish at everything else. The son of a British Army officer and prominent civil servant to the British government, he was raised to stand by family and not on ceremony. It is this strong bond to family that keeps his traditions and values around food whole and enduring. He's been busy as a badger promoting his latest book, Cooking in the Crown, Royal Recipes from Queen Victoria to King Charles III, and I'm so thrilled to have him join me today from London, and fortunately for us, he loves a good chat, but don't get him started on goat's cheese and Christmas pudding. Thomas Henry Charles Parker Bowles, welcome to Three Food Memories.
Hello, Savrin. Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. Now let's get straight into this cookbook, this latest one, Cooking in the Crown. The illustrations are jolly, the writing is merry, and the recipes you've pulled together are all over hale and hearty. How much fun did you have writing this book?
Well, it's always fun writing a book. This is 25 years of avoiding any conversation about the royal family. God, no, nothing. But actually, I thought, I've done a quarter of a century now writing about food. I'm a food geek. I collect food books. I'm fascinated by every part of food. And of course, the royal family from Victoria, where I start, and it was going to the late Queen, but obviously when she very sadly died, so it got a bit closer to home with the King and my mother. It's the research is always a fun bit. I'm quite sort of indolent, and I much rather be sat disappearing into sort of old recipe books and actually doing the bloody work. So it is fun. It's very different from I've done Fortnum's and all sorts of books, but this was interesting. Yeah, just purely from the amount that the Victorians and the Edwardians ate. They were massive trenchermen, and they ate all sorts from the haute cuisine down to good old fashioned roast pies and puddings.
So you were given the keys, as it were, to the Royal Archives. What was it like to get into that, all that record and stuff?
Well, it was fascinating. First of all, I applied like everyone else. I think if you're an academic or you're writing a book, anyone can apply. So I was very keen not to be. Obviously, there's a couple of recipes that I got from my mother that perhaps it would have been more difficult to get. But I was very keen. This was approached as a sort of an amateur historian. So you're basically sat in a room in Windsor Castle in the Round Tower. You're not allowed to take in your phone, you'll add your computer, no pens, and you sort of speak to these brilliant archivists and say, the first thing I said, could I have anything you have on food from Victoria onwards? Well, that turned out to be hundreds of thousands of documents. You had to be a little bit more specific. But there was something rather lovely about seeing these primary sources. They'd come out on, trolleys, like in, libraries all over the world, and they'd be brought up, and you'd look at them, and there would be sort of recipe books by second undercooks, and you'll really feel, as you do with these documents, you're going straight back and linked straight back into history. So it was fascinating. And then you'd go into royal biographies. I knew nothing about Victoria and Edward. I'm not really very up on my royal history, but I had to learn it pretty quickly. And you're just whipping through the book saying food, brilliant. So yeah, it was real fun doing it, and really interesting. And this was the peak with Victoria and Edward of the high church, Escoffier, grand, cuisine, sort of high cuisine. So it was fascinating seeing, they had at some points 34, 40 cooks in their kitchen. This was ornate, work intensive food at its very, very most, at its very highest.
The recipes you choose are characteristics of the monarch at the time that they were cooked for. The one in particular that I loved was crepes à la naturelle for George V. He was a very plain eater. What's some of the other characteristics you discovered about the monarchs?
Well, the fact you start with Victoria, who, obviously this great figure, the Queen Empress, and very powerful. She was probably one of the I suppose her son as well, but had real genuine power. And contemporary accounts are always very oily. Oh, the Queen eats like a little bird, she's very dainty. She was not a dainty eater. She ate really fast, and she ate a lot. So, she loved cakes and biscuits, and she was sort of right in her memoir or her diaries, and then we'd wander around Osborne in Isle of Wight or Balmoral, and there'd be a wonderful picnic, as if it just appeared out of nowhere, forgetting the fact that 40 footmen had hauled it across the moor and made it all look wonderful. She was also a very fast eater. So at these banquets, the food would go down in front of you. She would gobble, gobble, gobble away. And when she put her knife and fork down, everyone else's plate was whipped away. So some people, if you're a slow eater, didn't get to eat at all because you'd be like, boom. And it would go. And then again, her son, Edward VII, was probably one of the greatest eaters of all time. I mean, 12 to 14 courses of breakfast, a mid-morning snack of half a roast chicken or a lobster salad or a flask of turtle soup, lunch, 12 to 16 courses, tea, 5 cakes, crumpets, sandwiches, potted shrimp, and then on to the serious part of the day, which is dinner, which is 16 to 18 courses of foie gras and caviar and cream and butter. I mean, it's a miracle any of them managed to, live to the age they did, let alone rule and do all the rest of it. So that was the peak. By the time you got to George V, Edward VII's son, he was a naval man. His tastes were very basic. He liked roasts and puddings and crepes, and that was a sort of beginning of the end. Of course, there was World War One as well. So you see history through this prism, not just of food, but of the royal family. And you see the history of British food in a way. French food is still, well, it's still, the state banquets, the menus are still written in French. The royal chefs are still French trained. French was the language of posh, proper food of the aristocracy and the royal family, but mixed with this hearty game pies and puddings and all the rest of it. So yeah, it was just fascinating seeing these as eaters rather than monarchs.
You not only did you uncover recipes from monarchs, but you also there were other characters as well. There was Charles Francatelli, Queen Victoria's celebrity chef. There was the gorgeous Debo, the Dowager Duchess of
Yeah,
Devonshire. Who else did you come across?
Well, there were all sorts of fascinating things. Francatelli was a sort of Gordon Ramsay, Neil Perry of his day. He was quite like all chefs, has quite a temperament, and he was sort of sacked, I think. We're never quite sure why he was sacked, but you had to do quite a lot to be sacked. He was the most incredible pastry chef. You see his books, and these are works of edible architecture. These desserts that would take days to make, and they would sit beautifully in the middle of the table. It was the character of a wonderful man called Gabriel Shumi, who started as an under chef towards the end of Queen Victoria's reign, and moved all the way through Edward VII, George V, and ended up as royal chef to Queen Mary, who was actually quite a gourmand, quite a scary, imposing lady, but ended up cooking for her, who was the widow of George V. So, although you don't get any salacious gossip because it was an official book, so to speak, and it went through the palace, it was amazing, these tales of cooking on steamliners, the original Victorian Albert, in the middle of a storm when the King Edward, would expect his lark pudding or his lobster salad to come out just as it did at Buckingham Palace or Sandringham or anything like that. So it really gave you a taste of cooking not just on the high seas, but cooking at Balmoral, at Windsor in this vast kitchen. So all these different books, little bits and pieces I found, endless characters in there.
Let's start with your first food memory, prep school food that you
Yeah.
describe as dire and deranged.
Yeah. Horrible stuff. I mean, I grew up, my mother and father grew up in the country, perfectly normal. I mean, we didn't go out, we lived in the country, we didn't go out to dinner a lot unless we went to London, where I went out to Italian restaurants with my grandmother. But, it was just normal English food. It was sort of roast chicken and salads and maybe a bit of pasta, bit of fish, fish and chips and pies and all the rest of it. And it was just nice. We just took it for granted. This was normal food. And then age 8, I was packed off to prep school as boys of a certain age, of a certain kind in England were and still are. Well, actually, no, my son didn't. But and you got there, and it was fine. We were very privileged. But the food was just everything that's bad about English food. These stereotypes: grey, greasy, sullen, lumpen, cooked without care. It was like pig swill. Breakfast. A fried egg that was ice, like an ice hockey puck. It sort of had a slight tang of old fish, and great slabs of crappy bacon with all that white stuff all over it, and rancid fat, and sausages that someone described as slurry-filled condoms. Everything was so bad. Lunch was just grey, gristly, gritty mince in various different forms. Shove a sort of tin of cheap tomatoes. That was bolognese. Serve it under a bit of undercooked, potatoes with black bits. That was shepherd's pie, and it was always watery. Oh, everything was just. The only thing I really liked was the crisp, the chip sandwich on a Sunday that we'd have, and you can't bugger that one up. But I was just hungry the whole time, and not. I don't mean to sort of, I'm not talking about proper hunger. This is a very different form of hunger, but it just changed a normal appetite into a total and all-encompassing greed, and so I do have anything to thank that school for. And there were many good teachers and many nice people. But it was that it set me on the road, I think, subconsciously to writing about food.
Why do you think there was such a lack of care or attention to food in these establishments?
Because I think those schools very much, especially when it came, they were there to educate young boys. It wasn't quite for Empire. Empire, thank God, had gone by then. But it was a certain sort of thing. Well, you shouldn't. It's a sort of slight throw over from Victorian attitudes that you shouldn't talk too much about food, the sensuous pleasures of food, the joys and the wonderfulness of eating well. Food was fodder. I think they were, looking at cost, and I did bump into the headmaster a few years back. You have been avoiding him for about 25 years. I mean, bagged off the school relentlessly for so long. And he said I thought the food was quite good, and I disagreed. But I think there is that idea of funny enough how a lot of Victorians ate very well, but there is idea that food as pleasure is a bad thing. These sort of sybaritic pleasures are not. They don't work if you're supposed to be getting on and running the empire and doing manly things or that sort of rubbish. And I just think it was seen as an afterthought. It was more important with your cover drive or your your whatever it was, your spin on your bowling. Of course, I love cricket, so very important things, although I'm a rubber. Yes, and so it was just institutionalized. It was just unloved, and you'd find that, I think, hospitals, schools, private and public, or private and state. I think I do a column in the magazine I work for in the newspaper called My Life in Food. And it's always, one of the questions is talking about school food. Now, some people love British school food, and I was always jealous of other schools that got chips and pizza and burgers, however bad and greasy they were, or good pies. We never really even got that. Yeah, I think it was a throwback to the 50s, 60s, 70s of the glumness on the whole of British food, we remember we had rationing for many years after the war. You chucked in the fact that women had left the kitchen to go to work, so we began to lose touch with our culinary history, and just everything became a bit dull, really.
Your relationship with food can only be described as a love affair. I mean, the way that you write about food, whether you like it or not, there is just such a beautiful bond with it. Let's take, for example, I've never licked a filthy stained concrete-lined pigsty floor, but if I did, I'm convinced it would taste like goat's cheese. Of tomatoes, you write, as a child, I used to wander around my grandparents' vast, humid greenhouse, intoxicated by the lush green smell of ripening tomatoes. I mean, there is this beautiful connection there. But of Christmas pudding, you say, my misgivings about turkey pales into significance compared to my utter hatred of Christmas pudding. Even people who like this sullen, lumped belly buster can only manage it once a year, which says something. So here we've got like 3 beautiful versions, and there is this love-hate with everything. Where does this love come from?
I think greed, first of all. There's a great food writer, and he wrote A.J. Liebling, New Yorker writer, and he wrote a great book called Between Meals. And he said the first, thing you have to have as a food writer is an appetite, because you have to love food and be, I don't necessarily be greedy like me, but, I still wake up thinking about what I'm going to have for lunch or what I'm going to for dinner, or, there's a new food book or what new food book I'm reading, or, and that's it. I think it really helps. I think I'm really lucky to have a passion for food. I see most of life through food, having travel. I get itchy feet, and I'm lucky enough to travel a lot. I've worked in Australia a lot. I think probably I was a bogan in my last life, because it's just I am this. Everything is the same. But I miss Australia deeply, and we'll talk about other countries as well. But it is the passion, and food is not a hobby. Food is, it's not flower arranging. It's not sort of origami. It's the reason for our life. It's a one shared experience. You can dislike food. You can, eat to live, not live to eat. But it is our one shared experience, and you can see through that prism. You can see history. You can see sociology. You can see economics. You can see all sorts of things. And in these troubled times, the world's a fairly scary place at the moment. You believe more in the power of food to bring people together, the shared
Mm,
power of the
mm.
table. Sit down and break bread together, and just as much as food, like anything else, can drive people apart, it can also bring people together. And I think you have to remain an optimist, and seafood is this great unifying factor. I don't speak languages very well, but I can go anywhere in the world, rub my tummy and go yum and point at something, and immediately you have a very, very primal connection. People will, as coming in to interview people as a food writer, they tend to their guard is down as compared to, like, coming in as a political writer or something like that. So yeah, it is the most important thing in the world.
So would you say that food also provides a place of comfort, like a known entity for you, like a big hug?
Yeah, I mean, food is so intrinsically linked to memory, to nostalgia. And whether I'm talking about the appallingness of prep school, or the wonderfulness of growing up, and my mother's food, yes, we all talk about comfort food. What is the comfort food that we all love? Everyone, again, like you asked, I always ask a question in that interview: what is your comfort food? And everyone goes bang. Now, whether it's a roast, or whether it's fish and chips, or whether it's a Thai curry, an Indian curry, a million different things, but it's usually bowl food. It's usually a taste of childhood. It's usually, I've never heard anyone in the 5 or 10 years I've been doing it say, "Oh, what I really miss is when I come on comfort, I want to go and pull out the sous vide, and the Paco jet, and verify some olives. That's a different sort of thing. Comfort food is basic food. It's happiness. It's warmth. It takes you back to a good place.
You've mentioned that your mother's cooking skills and recipes have given you great inspiration, which takes us to your second memory, your mother's roast chook.
Yeah.
Comfort, proper British food cooking. What's so good about this roast chicken?
I suppose it was something, my mother was, and she'd be the first to admit this, she wasn't sort of sat there, elbows deep in dough, baking all these wonderful Victoria sponges. She was, like I am, a much more, she wasn't an empirical cook. To cook pastry and bread properly, you have to follow the recipe, at least to begin with. It's a science. Whereas the other way around, her cooking was just like, get something, shove it in the oven, feed the moaning kids. But the chicken it was just the thing, get the chicken, snip off that sort of passer's nose bit that hangs over there. She always said it was put the lemon up its bottom. It's not actually, it's its chest cavity, but you know what I mean. Shove a lemon up the arse. But season heavenly, lemon up the bottom, and then cover it with butter and shove it in the Arga. The Arga, they're these sort of the ranges that. And I don't like cooking on Arga because it's good the ovens, but the heat is hot and really hot. You don't have much control over it. But people who cook on Argas, especially in the UK, swear by them. They dry dogs, they dry children, they dry clothes, they warm a room. They have many other uses. I think their cooking ability is perhaps the least useful, although they're great for stocks and stews. But yes, and it would be, we'd always have a baked potato again shoved in there, some vegetables, either frozen peas, or peas from the garden, stuff from the garden, whatever's there. A salad, probably a very simple salad. And that was it. And she'd pour the juices. There'd be no gravy, just pour the grape juices over the baked potato and the roast chicken. And you know, as your kids, you like breast to begin with. But as you got older, it was a leg you wanted. My dad always liked the legs and the wings, and obviously that's what I like now. But it was just whether it's summer or winter, it was plain, but yet there was enough lemon in it to lift it up. And it just reminds me, I remember my ex-wife saying, "Look, if I hear you mention your mother's roast chicken one more time, I'm going to shove it up your arse," because it is quite a lot in a few of my recipe books. But it sums up for me the best of British food. Is start with, same as Italian actually. Start with good ingredients and do very little to them. Let the ingredients do the talking. But you do have to start with a decent chicken. You want a chicken that's been running around a bit. That costs a bit more. So we move into that whole difficult debate about. It's all very well for me to sit here, privileged, waving my finger, saying you must eat free-range chicken, and animals should be happy, and the rest of it. But I do truly believe that if we are meat eaters, the meat we eat, the animals that we eat, should be raised to the highest possible standards. I think that's just the way it should be. And I think that intensive farming is a blight on the earth, and regenerative farming. There are ways of bringing back. There are ways of eating ethically without being too po-faced. I hate finger waggers. I don't mean that. It tastes better, and the animals are happy.
You write that your mum was very hands-on growing up, and then whenever you would get into trouble, she would say things, "Oh, don't worry, Tom," and she'd move you on and things like that. And she was very supportive of wherever you and your sister were at. Did you ever help mum in the kitchen?
No, we generally argue in the kitchen. I say there's not enough light, or her knives aren't sharp enough, and we might lay the table or take away the plates. But no, when it came to that, it was very much her domain. Still is, although she cooks less now, obviously. It's her domain. When during lockdown, when I with the children was I was about to say stuck at her house in the country. We were very lucky to be there. She was in Scotland, and no one could move, obviously, because that's where we were. When lockdown came, that's where we were, and that's where we stayed. So every day we'd be having I think there used to be something called house party. It went bust, I think. It was like
Yes.
Everyone was like, you'd sit and have a glass of wine. It just seems like a different age, lockdown. But, every day it was just, coming into April. So her garden, she's got a wonderful vegetable garden. And it would start with the asparagus and the sea kale. And then it would come through to the broad beans and the peas, strawberries, and every day, and chard and spinach and blah, blah, blah. Every day I'd be, coming back and showing her a basket of all of her food. She was furious. But at least it wasn't going to waste. But, it was heaven. But yes, it was, we don't cook together, no. And also I love cheese and spice, and she doesn't like spice so much. So, everything I do's usually got tons of garlic and chili in it. So no, but yeah, I would cook. If I was going to cook for her, I'd cook something very simple, fish or something.
Sister Laura, tell us about Sister Laura. There's a very strong and close bond between you and her.
Oh, very much. She is, I never quite remember, 3 years younger than me. She's got 3 kids, a girl, Eliza, and 2 boys, Gus and Louis, who are the same age as my children. So Lola, my daughter, and Liza the same age, and Gus and Louis, the twins, and Freddie, my son, are the same. So we all grew up together, just like we did with our cousins in the 70s and 80s. It's like, this big sprawling family. We go down and stay. My sister's a very good cook as well. My brother's good on the barbecue, brother-in-law. So, you drive down to Wiltshire where they live, and it's just like our second home, really. The children disappear off, God knows where. We sit, 12 o'clock, right, time for a glass of rosé. It's just an incredibly nice, civilized house where they live, and it's a very happy place. And as ever, it revolves around food. And my mother comes over, and my father comes over, and my aunts and uncles and cousins, friends. It is, I suppose, the home now. The family gathers at, really, although we do go to my mother's as well, but it's very laid back at my sister's.
You write also, people blame their upbringing for everything, but my childhood and my sister's was absolutely idyllic. What was so good about your childhood?
I don't know. I suppose these days, everyone's. I mean, listen, this is not to do down people who obviously had awful childhood. I'm not talking about the people of genuine horror and horrible upbringing. I'm talking about a certain generation who tend to, it's not my fault, and blame everything for everything. Despite having had a perfectly happy upbringing. No, it was just, I got into trouble, and there were the bad times, and at school, and God knows what I got up to as a teenager and the rest. I was, but it was sort of, we didn't really. It wasn't like sitting at home watching telly. We were outside. We were made to go outside. I would have rather been watching the telly inside, but it was outside, climbing trees and making camps, and chucking things at each other and blowing up things, possibly playing too much with petrol and matches and that sort of stuff. But it was there was a certain thing when we grew up that after breakfast, off you went, especially in the summer, and you came back when it got dark. And God, I don't, we were probably climbing in deserted barns or hunting rats or whatever it was, it was, or swimming in mud or, whatever, it was fun. And then you got to, as you got older, you were away at school. So coming back home to have, like, after 6 weeks away, you'd come back and watch that TV show called The Fall Guy with Lee Majors on a Friday night with shepherd's pie and the dogs and, the fire roaring. And this was about as good as life got, and then maybe some nice ice cream for pudding. And so, yes, it was, you had school that you did because you were with your mates and that was all right. Then you came back and it was like, the holidays really were holidays. It was a happy time. And listen, as we got older, and there was more of an interest in my mother for obvious reasons. And, we lived in, there were paparazzi everywhere, hiding in bushes and chasing us and all the rest of it. We sort of thought that was normal because we didn't know anything different. And we had a very strong family, or, with my aunts and uncles and the rest. It was, we all can take the piss and laugh. And if the main thing is laughing, you have to have a sense of humor about these things. So that probably got us all through, especially my mother, I'd say.
Your children, Lola and Freddie, are teenagers now. Do they get
Yeah.
into the kitchen?
Really, actually, they're really good now. I think Freddie's quite messy, but I'm so pleased that they go. When we go down, because they go to weekly boarding school, and they didn't go young. They went to when they were 13 or something, and it was their choice, crucially. But anyway, they're very happy. But yes, they go. Instead of going to like the corner shop or whatever to go and buy sweets. So, oh, you're dick, if you get some, they cook, and that makes me really proud. If you can make an omelette, you can make a salad. I mean, omelettes are bloody hard. If you can do that, you can do the basics well. You're stood in good stead, and you won't just be living off ready meals and crap. And I didn't at university. I I didn't do much. Didn't do much at all. But apart from past. But I didn't cook as much as they do, and they've grown up. We grew up, as I said, a very traditional English background. That I didn't have my first in curry, as in curry house curry, not regional Indian food, until I was like 13, and it was like, oh my God, this is amazing, And this was just your bog stand and madras down the local curry house, but we didn't have that. The only spice I think we had in the house was Tabasco for Bloody Marys, and maybe an old tin or thing of curry powder right at the back for horrible coronation chicken. That was it. So that's probably why I'm so obsessed with spice and Thailand and Mexico and Malaysia and all the rest of it, China, because I didn't have it growing up. I didn't, it wasn't like, oh, poor me, But so it was. They grew up, on the other hand, eating everything. They, dim sum or Thai curries or oysters or it's like, oh, well, we have dinner, we can have, oh, I want sushi, no. When we grew up, it was just, you had what you were there, it was on your plate, you ate it, it was usually good, and that was it. They have all this choice, they can go to the whole world, and if they occasionally they get Deliveroo. So are we gonna have Cantonese or Szechuan? Are we gonna go and have barbecue or French or Italian? They just have this amazing choice, and I suppose it helped that their dad is a food writer and goes and a restaurant critic. But my ex-wife's a good cook, yeah, so they're really culinary aware, which makes me very happy.
Your would you say your secret power is the family unit? Is the fact that you are so close and bonded, and it's really kept you buoyant through all the years, both good and
Yeah,
bad? Yeah.
we've been, as I say again, we've been really lucky. I've been, got born on the lucky part of life, and there's been a few ups and downs. A lot of them to do with me, doing things I shouldn't be doing when I was younger.
I think we all
And,
did them, Tom. I
and,
think we all
getting
did
caught.
them. Some of us just didn't
Exactly.
get caught.
But these things are important. But yeah, I think that's what it is. It gives you, and this is why I continue saying, I'm not being trite or shallow by saying how lucky we were to know that our parents loved us. Could be annoyed by us, obviously, just as we annoy our children annoy us occasionally. But it was that central thing that when bad things happen and it all gets a bit crappy, we're all there. My father's very traditionally English, army, sort of action man, sort of did the Grand National, played polo, parachuting, all these sort of great sportsmen. I'm a shit sportsman, I can hardly kick a ball. I love watching it. But he's much, as you get older, he becomes much more sort of sentimental and so he's very funny and always been a very good father. And my mother and father are still best friends, and then you're lucky enough to have the king as my stepfather, who is the nicest man in the world as well. So we've been lucky to have good people around us, and yes, I realise more and more that happiness and confidence comes from being brought up in a loving family and being able to go back when times are hard. And we all try to support each other. Not to say we don't live like the Waltons. It's perfect. Hey, good night, whatever. Nothing's like that. But we do have if my mother, nowadays, if I ring my mum and where is she? And I suddenly turn on the telly. Okay, she's in Northern Ireland. It's quite easy. I can see by reading Men Online or where
So,
she is. Yeah,
so is there a
but yeah.
mummy's? Can I ask? Is there a mummy's boy and a daddy's girl scenario going on in the Parker Bowles family?
No, I suppose my sister would probably say I get away. Would get away with a lot more. I suppose to a point, as there always is in a family. But yes, my father would. Yeah, I suppose to a point. Yeah, but they're pretty even-handed. It was quite easy having a boy and a girl because you could they were always incredibly fair. If one person got a packet of sweets, the other one would get a packet of sweets, and if it went the wrong, it didn't. All hell would break loose. So it was very even-handed the way we were brought up. And my sister's much more private. I'm always writing books and banging on about them and doing, sort of
Yeah.
boring you on podcasts. So, but she's much more private and has got on with it. She's she's an art dealer and a very good one. And, but yes, I think, we all speak most days, not every day, especially if my mother's on tour or something. I'm not going to speak to her for a couple of weeks, but you'll get an email or a picture or whatever. So, yeah, but I don't think, they're obviously, it's the same old like family cliches to a point. It is this just very, very, a close family. And this includes my aunt, my mother's sister, Annabelle, my late Uncle Simon, who was married to him, my late Uncle Mark, my grandparents on my mother's side. I was much closer to than my grandparents on my father's side because my paternal grandfather died when I was very young, and we didn't really, we knew my father's mother, but we weren't nearly as close to the grandparents who were just our maternal grandparents. Were amazing. We used to go to Ischia, one of the islands off,
Yes.
and every year for 2 weeks, en masse, and that was obviously that was lovely. So we got a grounding in southern Italian food, and Naples is still, along with Mexico City, one of my favorite. I've literally came back from there. Was there last week. Great, one of the greatest cities on earth, Naples. Wonderful food, people, history, culture. It's just magnificent. And yeah, I could happily live there.
Well, before you move there, let's move into your third food memory, which you touched on briefly. Chilies. They are the
Yeah,
love of your life.
I just love chilies. I love chilies in their every form. This is a fruit that from the extreme heat of the jalapeno or the butcherlaki or those sort of silly ones, the scorpion, to habaneros, jalapenos, sort of anchovies, dried. And if you think, it's quite interesting, it was only Columbus really, and I suppose the Portuguese as well to a certain extent, they were indigenous to the New World, to Central and South America, and came over, so Thailand didn't have chilies until the 1402, mid 15th, 16th century, same or a bit later, same as India, Malaysia, China. So they're relatively new additions, but yet for me the two great chili cuisines, Thai and Mexican, they're used as, they're not as heat, they're as flavor, there's color. I travel everywhere with a bottle of Tabasco, especially on the plane when the food's rubbish. Tabasco's like culinary first aid. I'm growing chilies at the moment in the garden. My dad gives me various. He's like, I found the hottest one, the guy said, and you don't quite have the heat, the sun that you need to make really hot chilies. Well, you can. But yeah, I crave chili. It's an addiction, I suppose.
Explain the first time that you ate a chili and the awakening that happened.
I think it was like Tabasco, putting a drop of Tabasco in your tongue, going, "Wow, this is food that bites back." This is incredible because you go through the pain bit, and as chilies have this irritant alkaloid called capsaicin in. So when you eat it, your endorphins, the equivalent of your body's SAS, think, "Hell, what's going on here? We've got to rush down and take out these terrorists that are overwhelming, the pain, the senses, your taste buds." So they come in, and then endorphins give you this sort of high. It's this natural high. So even though when you're eating you're down in the south of Thailand with David Thompson eating some, it's not got beautiful, but mind-blowingly hot southern curry, and it's almost out of body, and your tongue's throbbing, your brain's throbbing, but afterwards you're just like, ah, so it's food. It's sort of like eating food in Technicolor. It gives you this explosion of different flavors. So yes, and it's not all about heat, although I've been eating silly hot ones and sauces. No, I just love chilies.
One of your loves is the Chin Chin Jungle Curry, Chin Chin, the restaurant in Melbourne.
I love.
Now, the restaurant tags this particular jungle curry as hotter than your first boyfriend. Thomas, how was your first boyfriend? How hot was your first boyfriend?
I mean, it was. I love. I lived in Melbourne for 2 spells of 3 months.
What were you
And
doing here?
I was filming a food show. First one was I was living in Sydney, and it was they were all for 9. It was 3 years, and it was called The Hot Plate with Scotty Pickett, who's a great
yes,
mate.
Scotty. Yeah.
And he's got a lot of restaurants in Melbourne, and he's like my brother. I love him with all my heart. And I came out to Melbourne about a year ago to do some stuff with him. But anyway, I love him. But yes, so it was firstly in Sydney, and then Melbourne, where I was living in South Yarra. And the food in Melbourne, you know what I mean? It's the coffee. I became a coffee snob in Australia because even 7-Eleven has decent coffee. You just can't drink crack. I can't drink crack coffee anymore. I just grind my own, I do a pour over. But I just love living. And we spent a lot of time. We go and see the footy on a Saturday. So we would go to Chin Chin and then go and watch the footy and go Bombers. And it was it's just a really I just loved. I really, really miss Australia, and it was the second show I did was called Family Food Fight. I did it with Matty Moran and Apollo Luvu. It was and that was great fun as well. So to get straight in with all these great Australian chefs and work with them long days. You become very close mates with them, and then they tell you got to go here and you got to go there, and you go with them, and it's just like that thing. And I got deep into the Australian food scene, and just whether you're at the top end with the Josh Lylands and the Matt Morans and that sort of thing, or I think Sydney has some of the best, proper Thai there is in the world, really, really out of this world. And yeah, I loved living in Australia. I love Australia.
Well, this is what you say about Australia. Australia gets into your soul. It gets into your bones. What exactly are you referring to? Is it the food? Is it who we are? Is it the place that we meet?
It's everything. It's the fact that you'll never be stabbed in the back in Australia. You'll always be stabbed straight in the face. The fact that you still call it in your most proper newspapers, somebody was bashed last night, in terms of Strawn, that Clive James of Australia, the language of pokies and tradies and everything from the TV. I travelled a lot on the first show. We lived on a Virgin flight because we travelled between Melbourne, Sydney, Brizzy, and Perth. So we got a lot of MRs. We we're travelling a lot, and I miss Qantas as like Pie Fridays in the lounge. It's always fun. And I love pubs, and I loved how cold the beer was, and you know what, that you didn't have to dress up for stuff, and you don't coming from a country that's very class based and very am I wearing the right thing, am I doing the right thing? It's just a breath of fresh air to come to a country so beautiful and in many ways so diverse. And it was just I just felt immediately at home the moment when you come into Sydney over the golf courses and you start hearing it's not so much the kookaburras, but that sort of bird that you hear in the morning.
The
You hear
bird
it,
song, yes.
the bird song. There's a certain, and there's also that slight edge of danger that you always laugh at us about. You know, the kids we were living in North Bondi, like, you know, cliched English lot, when we were in Sydney, and they're in the garden and they were like, "Oh, Dad, we found a spider." It's like, "Well, don't kill the spider." Oh my God, don't touch the spider. It's probably everywhere. Oh, you know, and it was, I remember flying in once to Cairns, and I was going up to Palm Cove to do something, and of course it was a beautiful day, and there's Palm Cove, and the water was glittering, and I pulled off um, my clothes, got into my swimmers, sprinted onto the beach, ready to jump in. About 4 people tackled me. You know, salties, jellyfish, box jellyfish, iritagaki, bull sharks. Oh, it was everything. You know, you just don't swim at the moment, and that's what it's still something for people who the most. We don't really have any. We have an adder, which is a sort of small snake that comes out occasionally in the country, and might, if you're very unlucky, you know, you don't want a dog to be bitten, by it. But you know, you've got 7 of the most poisonous snakes on earth. You know, just mate, it's just a brown snake. You know.
What sort of
Yes,
Aussie do you think you'd make?
I think I'd make great. I think I'd be. I mean, I love Sydney dearly. I love Sydney to come every weekend to. Melbourne, I fell totally in love with because Melbourne is for life. Sydney is like, yeah, hey, Sydney, let's all have a beautiful, beautiful people, beautiful beaches. Everything's very cool. Melbourne, you know, Sydney opens its arms straight away to you. You know, hey, you know. Melbourne doesn't care if you like it or not. You have to put your time in with Melbourne, you know, because it's just like, yeah, whatever, you know. It doesn't. It's not going to go, "Oh, we love having you here." And then I love Brizzy because everything's quite. They're quite terrifying. The police in Australia, I find. Like you do a U-turn or something like that, and they're like, woo! They're quite serious and quite, you know, you can't go, "Oh, sorry, all right, officer," you know, you're not going to get away with, you know, a U-turn or going up the wrong way, or going over the speed limit or anything like that. So Brizzy, it seems things get a little bit more proper, but things move a bit more slowly up there in Queensland, and I like that as well. But I loved, you know, I've done the New South Wales coast. I haven't been to Darwin. I'd love to go to Darwin, and I haven't been to Canberra. But anyway, there's so much for Australia I haven't seen. But every day you could go somewhere new and love it, you know. And it's I haven't even done the Margaret River actually. But anyway, that's by the by. But it's it's everything. You somehow you can't. I have a similar feeling in Mexico, although I can speak Australian. I can't speak Spanish very well. But yes, and there's always, you know, just, I mean, it's beach life I found in Sydney very much, and more city life in Melbourne. But yeah, it was some very, very, very happy times with some really dear friends I made there, who luckily I see when they come over, and any excuse to get back over to you, I'm there.
Well, we'll have you back anytime, Tom. So bring it back. Bring it
I,
back. Any city you choose, it's yours. Your social cause, you've chosen action against hunger.
yes.
There are some staggering statistics around world hunger. It's
I mean,
one.
you know, in
You
11.
you tell them.
Well, it's 1 in 11 people in the 21st century, you know, are suffering from hunger, and it's 40% of the world's diet, including Australia, including the UK, doesn't have a healthy diet. It just seems absolutely mind blowing, and especially in the war zones, you know, where in, you know, at the moment there are wars all over the place, and you know, the most awful humanitarian crises beyond politics, beyond right or wrong, or who's doing this or who's doing that. People are suffering, people are hungry. And what I love against Action Against Hunger is not only just sort of 90, it's not one of those vast bloated charities where CEOs are paid millions of pounds and they go around in nice cars and that sort of thing. This gets the money onto the ground and where the people need it, getting people fed in places after natural disasters, after wars. And it's a really transparent, it's a really, really, you know, fantastic. They partner with governments and policymakers. You know where your money's going, and you know, to get it onto the thing. And you know, it's they want to tackle the root of hunger. It's not just give food. It's like, you know, as good old, it was, I don't know if it was Jesus or one of the apostles said, you know, you can give them food, but you've got to, the seeds you've got to give it, or the fishing rod, that sort of thing, you know. And that joking aside is very much It's all about providing, food security, and getting experts in. But it's getting money and food and education programs to the places that matter. It's helping to rebuild, helping to make sure that food security is food insecurity and infant mortality it seems only right that all that the food world has given to me, and I do. Bugger all, we've got we do every year. Great friend of mine, Bill, who's a food writer, started. It's basically sort of chefs versus critics. So all the critics go into the kitchen at a restaurant, and they're judged by the chefs, which gives them obviously a lot of pleasure. And then we sell off, whether it's dinners or lunches. And it's just, in a tiny way, and not in a, oh, aren't we wonderful way, but it's in a time we're trying to help. We sit and we're lucky enough to eat some of the most delicious food in the world, and we're in the best restaurants and chefs. And so it only makes sense to support a charity like Action Against Hunger that is a magnificent charity.
actionagainsthunger.org, and we'll put more information in our show notes. Tom, we have an MFK Fisher serve at fourth tradition here at TFM, where I love her too. You're probably the only one who knows who she is, the American authoress. Now, where our previous guest serves you a dish. Our previous guest was Korean chef and former Iron Chef UK Judy Jew.
So I love Judy, yeah.
And she loves you. So this is what she served you: a folded kimbap stuffed with kimchi, ham, or spam, because she said she's a bit of a fan for the spam, with a fried egg and a bit of cheese. So she's kind of rolled it in rice. Usually it's made like sushi, and then it's kind of folded into a sandwich. So she's given a spin on it, and there's a version of it in her cookbook. How do you feel about this dish?
Anything Judy cooks is fantastic. I spent a couple of very merry nights in Seoul with her. And my God, the South Koreans like a drink. Yeah, beware the shoju over there. And deceptively, you think, oh, it's fine, it's okay. But I love Korean food, South Korean food, and the regional idiosyncrasies like everything else, and whether it's the barbecue and the bibimbap and I love it. So yes, so I would eat that obviously in moments and be delighted with it.
What would you like to serve forward to our next guest?
Well, I'm not sure. I hope the next guest would like chili. There'd be two things I would do. There are two sort of staple dishes I cook. The first one would be my mum's roast chook, but that's basic if you don't want. My second one would be a sort of northern Thai larb, very very fragrant with herbs. You mince the chicken very fine. I've actually got a larb knife a friend gave me, which is very long. You chop, so it's very very small. Then you've got lime juice, fish sauce, chilies, lots of herbs, and you finish it in a little bit of chicken stock as well. Lots and lots of herbs, and you finish it with some roasted sticky rice powder for crunch and that sort of very nutty taste. So you've got texture, you've got the sharpness of the lime, you've got the saltiness of the fish sauce, you've got the heat of the chili, you've got the fragrance of the herbs, and use as many chilies as you dare. Serve it with lettuce or whatever you want. This is basically a sort of northern Thai stroke Laotian salad, and it's good for you. It's full of life, it's full of flavour, and it's just wonderful. So that's what it would be. It'd be a chicken or a pork lard if you eat pork.
Now, I give you an opportunity to ask me a question. What would you like to ask me?
What is your favourite restaurant in Melbourne?
Oh my goodness, I was thinking about the other day. It has to be, and I think it's closed down now. I just forget it. I can see it. It's right on the street front. It's called Pellegrini's. It's that tiny little cafe on the corner that you can go to morning, noon, and night.
Yeah.
And it just has the patina of decades and decades and decades of eating and people and stories and that service. You don't have to look far to see history in that place. I think it's
Yeah.
closed actually, Tom. I
Has
think
it? Oh, that's
I
awful.
think it has. I could have that wrong, but where I'd go there for breakfast and there would be that Italian style bread there, and then you'd go for lunch and there'd be a pasta, and then there'd be another pasta at dinner time. And the way they would serve you, they would just get a piece of cake from a tray and then just flop it onto a dish, and then they'd put the
Oh,
coffee down and everything would bang, and the formica and the old photos and that were around the place. It was a place that was well lived, and you went there and you could eat on your own and you were part of something. So that would
well,
be
that's so
my.
sad it's closed.
I think
Oh,
I'm going to check that. I'm not too sure.
oh gosh. Well, don't tell me that Flower Drum's closed as well,
Still
because
there,
I love
still there,
still there.
still there, still
That
there.
is, as long as someone else is paying. Anyway, great restaurant.
Tom, I said at the beginning of the introduction that your mother was a senior civil servant in the British government. Can you tell
Yeah.
me exactly what it is that your mother
Well, I
does?
was trying to work out. I thought you were talking about my father. I said, right. She is married to the king, which makes her the queen. Yes, that is a senior civil servant. Yes, she very much like the king serves. Is there to serve the British people. And yes, who knew, eh?
Who knew?
Um,
You and Laura
who,
must be immensely proud of Her Majesty the Queen.
oh, hugely, and people have. Do and will write, and not everyone has different views, but the one thing that they don't know is what a good mother she's been and what a good friend she is, and sister and aunt and all the rest of it. She's a wonderful lady and incredibly proud, and especially after the last 2 years, it hasn't been easy for lots of people. She's proved, as we always knew she would and does, what a hard worker is, committed, honest, but we're obviously very, very proud of her. She's a great mother and a great woman, and I'll take on anyone who wants to.
I will join
Uh,
you. I will
many
join you with the pitchfork. Please send Her Majesty my regards. And if only it was the 80s that we could share a ciggy in the back garden, I'd love to be there with her.
I've given up smoking he's given up smoking a long time ago. But also, what a joy that was, and thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Tom. That's it for this episode of 3 Food Memories.